Good afternoon. My name's Archie Gemmell. I hope everybody's well. I'm the Aerospace and Defence Sector Manager for NQA, and I've been asked to give a short webinar presentation on the AS9104-1 transition. So just to give you a little update on kind of what's going on in the background, and ultimately how it may affect you in the coming months as we go through the transition process. So I'll run through a slide deck with a short PowerPoint presentation, and then I'll give you the opportunity to ask some questions as well. What I would say is the presentation will be issued out at the end and given to you. So just answering your question as we speak, Vicky, there, and that will be forwarded on to you. And if you've got any questions following that, reviewing it offline and everything, you can get in touch with the team and we'll endeavour to help us as best we can with it as we move through that transition process. We will be using the NQA website with a small transition site on there, so we'll be trying to relay information to you through that, and there'll be some communication, some emails and that as we go ahead as well and move into the new year type thing. So I'll run through the presentation, and like I say, you can drop some questions on, and I'll try and gather them up either at opportune points through the presentation or at the end. Okay. So there we go. So just a little bit about NQA. We've been a global brand for 35 years now with over 50,000 certificates, kind of average customer partnerships of about 10 years. So worldwide, we've got over 1,000 employees, and we're in the region of 37 countries now as well. So relatively large organization. We deliver training as well, so training website that identifies the types of training, so aerospace training, internal auditing, and aerospace awareness training as well. So feel free to look at that as well. They're all accredited courses as well that are delivered. Okay. Okay, so just a quick bit about me. So I'm Archie Gemmell. I'm the sector manager at the moment. I've been with NQA since 2017, and I'm an aerospace experience auditor. So previously I did 22 years in the RAF as an aircraft engineer and used that to transition into becoming an auditor. So I've been auditing initially ISO 9000-2001, and then use my industry experience to qualify as an aerospace auditor. So I audit 9100 and also distributors as 9120, but I'm also trained to do counterfeit avoidance for 6081 as well. So kind of putting all the schemes together that sit in the aerospace sector with the exception of 9110. Okay, so to the crux of the presentation really. So the 9104-1 standard is a top level document that sits behind all of the aerospace schemes. So whether you have a certificate for 9100 for a general aerospace organization, or 9110 for maintenance repair, or 9120 for stockists, it's all governed and managed under the guidelines in the 9104-1. So this looks at the methods of auditing, how we plan audits, and ultimately the key thing, the audit duration as well. It captures the requirements for all stakeholders. So that's looking at the process from end to end. So it looks from the top level where it's flowed down from the OEMs, but through the accrediting bodies, but all the way down to yourselves as customers as well. So it sets out the entire requirements across the whole piece from end to end there, with all the details and specific requirements for each within. 9104 hasn't been updated for a number of years now, so they released it last year, the new version, and been going through the transition period. They've had a few issues with it in terms of refining the information and it going back for review and then ultimately being released. But it was last released in 2012. So within the sector and the schemes, there's been a lot of updates since. So updates to key documents that sit in the background across the whole audit requirements. So looking at the 17021, the 17011, but also the IAF mandatory documents. So because of the changes, they've then made changes to the 9104-1 to bring it into line with everything and bring it up to date with where it needs to be. So as part of a release of any key document, it's issued with a supplemental rule. So this time around, it's been released with SR004. We're in the second version of that at the moment because it's been released and then reviewed and some amendments made as we've moved forward through the kind of transition period and moving towards actually transitioning all the different stakeholders through the process. So SR004 sets out the expectations of how the rollout will occur and how we apply the requirements and meet the expectations of the standard as well. Okay. So really, the 9104, bringing it into line with things now and bringing it more up to date, it covers three main areas. So it covers changes to site structures, changes to audit planning, but more importantly, the changes to the method of audit time calculation. So what they've tried to do is simplify the process and make it more streamlined and make it more structured around how you work and how we audit you as an organization to make the audits more targeted and focused. So it looks at a risk-based approach. So in line with the normal standards that talk about risk-based approaches and risk-based thinking, they've now set up the 9104-1 with that concept and moved towards doing some analysis up front so we can focus the effort of the audit on your organization. And this is based on complexity of your processes as well. So the first section really is the site structure. So this really simplifies the process. So at the moment, there's 5 different site structures. So you've got single, multi, several site, complex, and campus. So there's grey areas between each, and it's difficult to understand necessarily where people sit when they sit under the several, complex, and campus. So what they've tried to do is move away from this and make it really simple. So you're either a single site organization or a multiple site organization. And then with the other concepts that have been applied, we can then structure and focus how we deliver the audit. So this makes it much more simple when we set things up, but it makes it easy for you to understand the logic behind how it's set up and then how we can target and focus and risk-based the actual audit approach as well. Okay, so as you're probably aware, the existing method, and you'll have seen this in when your audits are planned and when your auditor gets in touch with you, your audit is based on an audit day calculation from the current version of the standard. So in table 2, it looks at the scheme that you're under, so 9100, 9110, 9120. And from table 2, it takes a number of employees that you've got. You then work out whether you've got design or not, and then it gives you a baseline number of days. From this, then it gives you the number of report writing days associated with the actual audit days. So you'll have seen this depending on the size of your organization, how many days you get. Then the certification body can add additional time for the report writing. So if you've got some multiple shift patterns where you need to be covered, there may be some additional time added for that. If it's really a really complex organization and you do lots of different tasks and processes that are complicated and detailed and need more time focused on the areas and that, so you can add days on for that. But basically it's a simple table that gives you a number, baseline number, with small additions that can be made if need be. And that gives you total audit days for the audit duration. So relatively simple and basic method. So what they're doing now is trying to move away from this to focus it on risk and how we audit you. So what they're introducing, which you may have seen already, so if you've been on Oasis, it's sat on Oasis on the IOQG website at the moment, so you can see it. They're looking at a thing called the OCAP tool, so Organization Certification Analysis Process. So this replaces the audit day calculation tool. And again, it starts with a baseline figure on a number of employees, But from this point, rather than it being based on whether you have design and what scheme you're on, it then looks at the risk analysis around that. And if you're a single site, an OCAP tool will be carried out for the single site. And if you're a multi-site, the OCAP tool will then be carried out for all sites. So you'll get the overall duration based on all sites with additions or subtractions based on what you do. Okay, so again, from this, the idea being and the concept behind it is it's more aligned to what you do so we can focus the audit. They've also taken out the requirement to carry out purchasing every year. So we can focus on areas of your organization that may be perceived as weak, where findings have been found or identified in previous years, and focus the effort around them and seeing how you're improving the processes. But this is based on how you're set up, but also the risk and complexity of the processes. So again, looks at complexity. This is from a defined table. So it's not kind of finger in the wind to determine where you are, whether you're small or simple, complex, or large, simple, complex. It's actually taken from a set of criteria from a mandatory document. So it's aligning you to where you sit within a certain set of criteria. We then look at some performance measures. So we'll look at your on-time delivery. So as we do normally at the moment, we take the information through the data gathering forms. We'll look at your on-time delivery, look at your quality. We'll also look at customer satisfaction. So looking at your top customers and how satisfied they are and how that's worked out based on maybe the on-time delivery for them. But also we'll look at previous audit reports as well. So we can identify where scores may have been low in the pairs. So when we publish your previous report, you've got your Form 3, and we assess the effectiveness of the process and provide the score. We then go back and review that and tie that in with the data that we've picked up at the current point in time as well. But we also look at internal audits, and how they're delivered. So is the individual carrying out the audit within the organization? Are they qualified? Have they attended a course? Are they an AEA? Have they done an internal course that's an accredited course? That type of thing. So looking at how we can do that and how that's delivered, so that can mitigate some of the risk there as well. So this combination of areas we look at and criteria within the OCAP tool provides then an overall risk score, which feeds in. So then from that, with some other different factors that I'll show you in a second, we can then determine the audit time and the overall duration of the audit with additions on that. Okay, so there'll be various inputs for the OCAP tool. So in essence, there will be, we'll take the data. So at present, you get a mandatory data gathering form prior to the audit. So a lot of this information will be captured in a similar format. So the process will involve NQA, setting up the actual OCAP tool and starting to populate that. And then we'll come back to you as the customer and ask you for the data gathering form. So what you'll see in the first instance is the content of the data gathering form that you currently get will change. There'll be some more information on there. We'll expect more from you and the timelines will change slightly. So when you've submitted that, your auditor will review it, check all the information, maybe double check some things with you, and they'll verify all the information in there. That'll feed into the OCAP tool, and then ultimately it will give you give us the audit duration, which we then share with you. So it can change slightly, and like I say, that can go up, but conversely, it can also come down as well. The OCAP tool is currently in an Excel format. It can be accessed through the IAQG website, Oasis website, and it's sat there that you can go in, have a look, see what it looks like, play with it, and just kind of understand the feel of it. But ultimately, what will happen is when Oasis migrates to version 3, The idea is that it will replace the audit calculation tool that's currently in there and sit within Oasis. Okay, so really the process for you won't change too much, and I say not too much. Really, it's the same method of capturing the data, but it's through that revised data gathering form. It'll be more comprehensive and will require more information, but the key thing for you is it will be sent to you earlier than normal. So at the moment, when we confirm the audit, 3 months before the audit is due to start, our system automatically sends you the confirmation letter, and you'll also get a copy of the mandatory data gathering form. That's at 90 days. If it doesn't arrive, generally your auditor will get in touch with you within the 90 to 60-day period to try and get all the information before so they can review it. This will change in that it will be sent to you 120 days before, so 4 months before the audit, so they can start planning. And this is written into the scheme as well. So this allows for the planning to be effective, opportunity to pull all the correct data, and then allow the review to be comprehensive, so we can make sure we get the planning right for the audit, so we can target the approach. Okay. Apologies, we've just skipped on that. So again, this is asking you for the relevant information. Apologies, it looks like my tool isn't showing all the correct information. There should be a picture in there. So like I say, just checking. Oh, here we go. Sorry, apologies. So this is some of the things that it'll be looking at. So when I talk about internal audits, it'll look at how long your program is, whether it's based on one single audit or multiple audits. It will then be looking at how it's driven. So is it performance based? So when there's findings, identifying the risk and feeding that back in. Looking at how it covers the full QMS and whether it's conducted annually. You'll then look at on-time delivery. So are you exceeding the expectations for the majority of the customers? And it breaks that out so we can see where you are. Are you meeting the requirements for all your customers, a few of your customers, or are you keeping your key customers happy and some not quite so happy? It'll look at the conformity of delivered products. So we'll be looking at customer returns and defining all this information. So when we select the most appropriate of these, it will then provide the risk score at the end. So customer complaints and feedback. But also from this, we're looking at additional standards that you may be required or choose to build into your system. So for instance, fares, is it a customer requirement or have you chosen to do it yourself? And there's a series of standards on there that are defined, and it'll look again like whether you choose to do it, whether the customer's required you to do it, and then what approach you take to them. So again, we can target more with a focus on the audit. Okay, so going back to how it's actually calculated. So there is a table involved, and the table 8 in the new version of the 9104-1, table 8 gives us the baseline figure. So when the risk analysis is carried out, adjustments can be made plus and minus 10%, but also based on site exclusions and reductions can then be made up to 50%. So additions, so if we need to use a translator or there's additional time for corrective actions, if there were numerous raised at the last audit, report writing, planning time, and then the additional standards. So where we looked in the review that you were using additional standards, we can apply additional time there so we can add some focus to them. So for instance, AS 13000, looking at APQP, PPAP, things like that. So we can target the areas, apply the time appropriately so we can audit them. And this is the table. So this is how it sets up based on initial audits, surveillance audits, and then recertification. So it starts off with the number of personnel, gives you the baseline, then the OCAP tool is applied. We look at the risk score and the analysis, and then it can adapt that based on the percentage. Okay, so the complexity of the organization, I talked about this earlier. So the details actually taken from the IAF MD5 document, mandatory document, and that sets out the guidelines and the criteria for that. And it provides the risk level. So it decides whether your company is seen as a low, a medium, or a high risk. So you can see there on the left, you've got the low, so only a few processes, a small scope, and the repetitive processes as well. So a small and simple. And you can see there for a medium, a large, simple, multi-site, but again, with few processes that are repetitive with a small scope. And then the high risk looks at large, complex, so multi-site, many processes, maybe have some unique and special processes as well. So maybe looking at paint or chemical processing and things like that. So you have a large scope there. And then this is where it ties the design responsibility in as well. So rather than that being added to the number of days initially, this then looks at the risk score with it. Okay. And then the performance-based elements. So we touched on them earlier again. So looking at your on-time delivery, conformity of delivered products. So looking at if you've got many escapes, what you've done with them and how you control them. Looking at the customer satisfaction, and then again looking back at previous years' scores. So again, there's criteria against that. So whether you exceed it, meet it, or you're below, and it gives you the risk score based on that. Internal audit, again, it splits this out. There's defined criteria there, and then it gives you a risk whether you're low, medium, and high. So how you implement your audit program, whether it's desktop, where you've got people out doing multiple audits, how they're trained, that type of thing. Okay. And this ties all of this together then in terms of the areas that are looked at. Okay, and this is where it comes up with the overall risk rating. So it pulls all of this information together and then gives you a risk rating score. Okay, so you'll see that in the bottom right hand corner. So it's looked at complexity, internal audits, all the key factors that we've discussed there, and then pulls up the risk number at the end. Okay, so again, touches on the actual requirements and where the inputs come to give you that risk score. So similar to what I showed you a couple of slides ago. And this then shows you the cycle. So initially with customer and who's involved, so the customer, certification body, and the auditor. So initially we go to you with the performance data, using the data gathering, pull that in. Then we do the analysis of the data, work out the audit duration, and this is done with the OCAP tool, so we can work out the risk. And then the information is verified and reviewed against the previous audit report as well. And then that comes back in, and then that feeds back through then. So it becomes the cycle going round. So checking the information, gathering the information from yourselves, checking it, running it through the OCAP tool, working out the risk, reviewing that against previous data, and then seeing what the trend is, and then coming back into the OCAP tool with the risk rating to define the days. Okay, so the latest version of the OCAP tool you can find on the IAKG website, so the link there will help you and they'll give you some more information. And then there's a link within that page. So this is a page where it drops onto. Okay, like I say, it's an Excel format at the moment. Okay, so using that information that's provided, so it seems slightly long and convoluted in terms of getting the information, but this is how we can properly then plan your audit. So looking at the information given and making the length of audit commensurate with what you do. So the effectiveness of your quality system and your complexity, but also your level of customer satisfaction. So if you're performing well, in theory, your audit should be targeted, and potentially you should have reductions there. If you're not performing so well, this should then help to target the focus of the audit and the duration against it. So we can look at the key areas where you may be underperforming. Okay, so NQA, like all certification bodies, has got to transition. So the training, the auditor training, was released back in January, on the 10th of January 23. So from that, in the SR004, they set out the requirements that all training should be completed and transitioned by the 10th of January 24. So ultimately, NQA will be looking to transition, so reviewing our quality procedures and the way we set everything up, so how we then, our quality system to deliver aerospace audits. We should be completing that transition by that point. And then from that point, once we pass transition, all audits will be delivered to the new standards. So mandatory training to be carried out. So all your auditors will be trained to the new standards. So in terms of discussion with them and understanding the process, you should be able to have a conversation with them, and they can explain the changes, explain how that's going to affect you when they're planning their audit. We're also looking to conduct the OCAP tool for all current clients. So looking at people that set up under the, initially looking at organizations set up against the site structures that won't be moving forward. So how that will affect them moving into multi-sites or single sites, depending on how it is, how the company is then set up, and reviewing that to see how it would affect you, and then sharing that information with you as well. And then once we figure that out, we will share that with you to go forward. But ultimately, as we transition, NQA will transition our system, that will get updated, we'll transition across, and then we'll transition with yourself. So the audits will be against the new standard, and there's a special visit involved. This will be encompassed within your next visit. So the next visit you do will be to the new standard, and then ultimately what you'll see is your new certificate that will be published will have the 9104-1, the new version referenced on it instead of the 2012 version. So when you look at your current certificate, you'll see that it references the 9104-1 2012. It'll end up with the updated standard on there. So information on transition will be published on the NQA website. We're looking to publish updates when we know more information as we move through the process. Also on social media, so looking at LinkedIn updates, and again, the In Touch magazine, the monthly e-zine. Also, your auditor will reach out to you and they'll explain the process. So if you're having difficulties with producing the information and how that feeds into the OCAP tool and everything, they'll be there to discuss that and update you with how the process changes, and help you through that process for the next audit. And then you'll see the audit tool, the data gathering form issued and the OCAP tool completed, and you'll see the outcome of that. And then ultimately the audit will be conducted, and then you'll get a new certificate with a new standard on there. So if you record, that's it in terms of the detail around it. So like I say, ultimately it is around a risk-based approach to your audit and how we plan that and how we set the times up for it and the duration. And like I say, we'll be sharing information on the various platforms, LinkedIn and the website and everything, and blogs being put out around it as well. So if there's any questions, that's it from me. So if you want to put some questions up, if there's anything, if not, the PowerPoint presentation will be issued out to everybody, so it'll be emailed across to you, And if you think of anything once you've got it, once you've kind of digested it, feel free to get in touch with the aerospace team, and we'll endeavour to help. There's some information already on the website at present. There's a small transition page on there which gives you more information on the OCAP tool, and it gives you a bit more detail around how it's used and the impacts of it as well. So to support this webinar as well. One thing I would add in terms of an update as well, you may have seen it, there should be some email communication out. There's also some information going on to the website and LinkedIn. If it's not on there already, it'll be on there in the next day or two regarding Oasis version 3. So you may be aware that Oasis is moving from the current version to version 3. I've mentioned it in the PowerPoint presentation there, but what we'd add is there's going to be a freeze point. So on the 30th of June, the current Oasis will become read-only. So it shouldn't affect too many organizations unless you're going through an audit, either just had an audit or having an audit and going through the process. It will be frozen for 3 weeks, potentially 3 weeks, while they migrate the current data set onto the new version. And then you'll be able to log in and the audits will be managed in exactly the same way going forward. The look and feel of it will change. So the functionality is slightly different, but in essence, everything that you can do on it now in terms of your audit and the information should, in theory, cut straight across, and it should be seamless, we're assured, by the IAQG. If you've had an audit in the last 6 weeks and you've got open NCRs, you may not be able to upload the information. So in this instance, discuss with your auditor, and then you'll have to share that by email, and the information will then be added to Oasis when it comes back online. The timelines and everything will still apply, but the method of doing it will adapt slightly. So some of that information should be in the LinkedIn page, post, and also on the website. If your audit is due to start after the 30th of June, and in that 3-week period, essentially your auditor will be writing the audit report up and sharing with you in a Word format. They'll share the NCRs with you, but they'll discuss the method of sharing the information to go through that process. So again, it will be shared by email probably. It will also be saved, and then there's a requirement for certification bodies to then populate Oasis when it comes back online and get everything back in there. But if you've got any issues at all, again, you can get in touch with the aerospace team at NQA, or you can talk to your auditor, and they'll be happy to discuss there as well. Okay, so just looking at questions. Okay, so I've got a question here from Tammy asking about the auditors being trained by the January deadline. So all the auditors that audit for NQA are undergoing the training or have already completed it. So we're looking to have the training completed internally by the end of July. So all our auditors are in a position that when NQA submit their documentation to UCAS to transition to the new standard, all the auditors are trained and ready to go so that they can then deliver the audit to the new standard. Essentially, when we say the new standard, it's just the OCAP tool and the planning aspects in the background. So the actual audit delivery itself should not change for you as the customer. I hope that answers the question, Tammy. So looking Clyde's question there. You say about companies that maintain 9001, 2015 certificates. The calculation should work with that as well. There's not too many customers like that, but that's something we have looked at and assessed and built into our procedures. So we would discuss that directly with you when we look at the OCAP tool as well. Okay, and then Serena, you've asked about a copy of the presentation. Yes, like I say, the presentation will be issued out to everybody by email. That should be done in the next couple of days, and you've got it. And like I say, feel free to get in touch, reach out if you've got any questions, and we'll endeavour to help you. So, any more questions? There's none at the moment following them, but any more questions quickly? Okay, if there's no more questions, I'll stop the presentation now. Like I say, you'll get the information. Thank you very much for attending. I hope it's been of use. And like I say, if you would like more information, feel free to reach out. I hope you have a good afternoon. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.